Hello, once again. I've got two more of these, possibly three of this series, Why Do Ghosts Wear Clothes and Where Do They Get Them? Seemingly silly question, but you know, sometimes you'd be surprised some of the unexpected answers you might get from such silly questions. Tonight, I'm going to be telling you the story, supposedly the true story, very well documented, and quite a few people witnessed it. Tragedy, true tragedy. I think it's more tragic than it is spooky, but it also is quite revealing in ways. The behavior of these spirits in this story. And that would be the ghost of Eastern Airlines Flight 401. About an airline accident. And actually, I know these ghost stories aren't very uplifting. But I want to get through these. I plan to tell this story and possibly another one. But I want to get through these. And that'll be pretty much the end of it. Two or three more of these, and I don't know where this channel's going at that point. But this was on my list of things to do, things I'd written down on the cover on Why Do Ghosts Wear Clothes and Where Do They Get Them? So this is the story of the ghost, as in plural, ghost, Eastern Airlines Flight 401. And I'm going to read this. I've written all this down, so they made a movie about this. It's an old movie, but it was pretty... I didn't think it was scary. I thought it was just tragic, you know. I'll get on with this. Oh, see if I can keep it around 15 minutes. Hopefully. All right. In my opinion, one of the most compelling, well-documented, and interesting ghost stories in existence is that of the ghost of Eastern Airline Flights 401. The disaster, Airlines disaster. You may or may not be familiar with this story. Either way, in regards to this series of Why Do Ghosts Wear Clothes, this event is worth revisiting. On the night of December 29th, 1972, a brand new Lockheed L-1011 jumbo jet was arriving at Miami, Florida's airport after an uneventful flight from New York's JFK airport. During the final approach, a technical problem arose. An indicator light that should have lit up when the landing gear was down failed to light up. And you don't want to land a jet if you're not sure if the landing gear's down, do you? An airliner, at that jumbo airliner. As this was obviously a critical item for a safe landing, it gained the undivided attention of the flight crew in the cockpit. Though the airship's captain, Captain Bob Loft, correctly guessed the landing gear was down and it was just an indicator light that was malfunctioning, he made the responsible decision to abort the landing until that guess could be substantiated as a fact about the landing gear being down. Subsequently, Miami Airport assigned Flight 401 to an altitude of 2,000 feet and a course that took the jumbo jet over the Florida Everglades to allow the crew time to take care of the problem. 2,000 feet isn't really that high up. I parachuted at that. It's about the highest I ever parachuted from. It's about up. You see like these big jumbo or these big clouds, cumulus clouds. They're about 2,000 feet, usually around about there. It's not that high up, honestly. Give them time. So they went over the Everglades. Give them time, you know, at 2,000 feet to figure out what's going on. Things went wrong as the autopilot was at some point accidentally switched off. while everybody, to include both pilots, focused all their attention on the malfunctioning landing gear indicator light. They had the autopilot switched off and nobody noticed it, apparently. Meanwhile, the airliner was gradually descending. It was late night and dark, so nobody saw the swamp getting closer and closer and closer. Furthermore, the jet's descent was so gentle and gradual, nobody aboard perceived the drop in altitude. Then, at 11:42 p.m., when the airliner suddenly met the Everglades swamp, 103 of the 178 people aboard were killed. 103 of the 178 aboard that aircraft were killed. Among the dead were two of those who were most directly involved in trying to correct the landing gear trouble. The jumbo jet's captain, Bob Loft, and its flight engineer, Don Repo, R-E-P-O. The captain, Bob Loft, and the flight engineer, Don Repo. Reports of sightings and interactions with the ghost of these two men would soon begin on other Eastern Airline flights involving other L-1011 jumbo jets that had been fitted with aircraft parts that were salvaged from Flight 401 wreckage. So they took some of the airline parts off this wreckage in the Everglades, and they used, the Eastern Airline reused some of these parts, salvaged it, and put them on some of their aircraft. Aircraft and Eastern Airlines that had parts from that wreckage, they started seeing both Loft and Repo like full-bodied apparitions. On at least 20 occasions, Flight 401's Loft and Repo were reportedly encountered on other Eastern Airline flights. Many of those who gave accounts of encountering these two men were people in places of responsibility, such as other Eastern Airline pilots, flight officers, and stewardesses. Eventually, even the vice president of Eastern Airlines met one of these ghosts on a flight and, assuming the ghost was a uniformed Eastern Airlines employee, was carrying on a conversation with the man up to the point where he suddenly recognized the man as the deceased Captain Loft, at which point the man vanished before his eyes, and that was the vice president at the time of Eastern Airlines this happened to. Most of these people personally knew the deceased captain. They personally knew them, so they would recognize them, and the flight attendant, as they had worked with them. Often these ghosts would carry on conversations with others. They were described as very lifelike and wearing the full flight uniform of Eastern Airlines at that time. Where'd they get their clothes from? The same clothes they died in, apparently. The purpose of this haunting was plainly established by the ghost of the deceased engineer himself. They interacted with people and he told them why they were there, as he reportedly appeared to a captain of a flight that was in progress and said to him, "There will never be another crash. We will not let it happen." To this effect, a stewardess also reported seeing the face of a man staring at her through the window of the galley's oven. She excitedly got two other crew members who came and also saw the face of this man staring out of the oven window. One of these people had been a good friend of Repo in life and instantly recognized him. At this point, the ghost said to them, "Watch out for a fire aboard this airplane." And then it vanished. Aviation records record that this aircraft did eventually experience a fire. On another occasion, I'm almost through here, a woman was sitting next to a man wearing the uniform of an Eastern Airlines flight officer. She noted with some alarm that the man looked very pale and ill. and would not speak, so she called for a stewardess to come see if the man was okay. The man simply vanished before the eyes of the woman and several other people present. That's kind of creepy. Later, when shown photos of Eastern flight engineers, the same woman identified the man as Don Repo, a person she had no prior knowledge of. The sightings were reported to the Flight Safety Foundation that determined the sources were credible and the stories were indeed significant. However, Eastern Airlines at the time was not overly thrilled by these reports and firmly directed that its employees cease reporting the hauntings, with the threat of termination of employment. Regardless, the ghostly encounters apparently halted after all the recycled components of the ill-fated Flight 401 were removed from all active aircraft. They took it serious. The airlines took it very serious. Enough that they put it together that it was associated with the recycled parts from the aircraft wreckage and took them all. As soon as they removed them all from the other aircraft they were using, it all stopped. Which is kind of peculiar, isn't it? At the same time, certain groups of people were intervening through prayer vigils. At the same time, certain groups of people were intervening through prayers and prayer vigils in the hopes that the two ghosts would move on to a better place. And there was an old movie on it. It did show these people getting together and praying for Loft and Repo. That they're people that knew them, their friends and family, and people that worked with them, and people that had seen the spirits of these two men. They started doing the right thing. They prayed about them, and whether it's because they were praying that these people would move on, and or because they removed the parts from the other aircraft, that they were using. Either way, it stopped then. And so that's the end of that story, the haunting of Flight 401. And I think there's some books written on it. It's an old story. It's like 50 years old at this point, but it's pretty widely documented enough that the whole Eastern Airlines got involved to try to intervene both spiritually and they took it very serious when all their pilots, stewardesses, and some of their passengers are talking about meeting these two ghosts who were trying to help them out. All right, so let me finish this up. This accounting is significant to this study I'm doing on why do ghosts wear clothes. It's just a whimsical title for this part of this series for the following reasons. 1, the ghosts were wearing the clothing they knew during life and at the time of their death. However, their uniforms were solid enough and in presentable enough order as to allow people to assume that they were living legitimate Eastern Airlines flight crew. The uniforms were certainly not showing any evidence of a fiery crash into the Everglades. This indicates that ghostly apparel, to include buttons, badges, name tags, and other items, are not what people were wearing at the moment of death, or at least not always. 2, the two ghosts were by all accounts trying to look after the safety and well-being of the passengers and crew of the aircraft the ghosts knew in life, and possibly felt an extremely enduring sense of responsibility as well for the crash. As such, one could not make a strong case that these were demonic impersonators. They were trying to protect the people on the aircraft, and they made it clear that's what they were doing, that they weren't going to allow any more crashes. Kind of just a sad story, really. It happens, 3, there appeared to possibly be some sort of spiritual connection between these ghosts and material items salvaged and reused from their wrecked aircraft. Make of that what you will. I don't know. Something to do with energy and connections. Did the presence of recycled airliner parts from Flight 401 somehow enable these spirits? If so, what's the mechanism behind this? Alright, finally, I want to mention number 4, when the ghost warned the crew in the galley to watch out for fires in the aircraft, and a fire eventually occurred in the aircraft, there is evidence that these ghosts had some ability to see into the future. This doesn't suggest magic, but does suggest that time operates differently in the spirit world. So I wanted to use that Flight 401 as a case example for some things that I'm going to get into the next video. I got a little bit of time left for a change. I've got a couple more to make on these where I draw some conclusions about the question topic of this series. And after I get done with that, I've got a couple. I want to do yet at least one more on my forgiveness series when I feel the time is right. And beyond that, I'm not sure what I'm doing with this channel. So we'll get through it. I'm not going to go on forever. It's been like 12 years I've been making these videos, and I enjoy doing it. But I've said over and over and over, I don't have an endless supply of stories. Personal ghost stories, I had quite a few, and then encounters with God and His angels, which I put most of them up front. First stories I ever made on this channel. I wanted to give God the first fruits of it. And like I said, if I just keep coming up with these stories, then you need to question whether or not I'm just making them up. But I'm not making these up. I still have hauntings going on now, and I just don't really want to talk about it at this time. And maybe I will someday, I don't know. But alright, so that's it. The story of Flight 401, Eastern Airlines Flight 401. There's quite a bit about it on YouTube and on the internet if you're interested. It is a pretty interesting, tragic ghost story. Hopefully, I think maybe the prayers, they had prayer vigils. The family, friends, and co-workers all got together and had prayer vigils for these two men's spirits. And they had some interactions from the spirits during their prayer vigils. So there's like a book written on it. I've read the book. I think I would say that I need to pray. When I encounter a haunting, I need to pray. And I want to thank one of my viewers for suggesting that more than once to me, that I'm allowed to see these things because I should be praying for their to get free to go up to our Lord God and Jesus Christ. That they're earthbound for whatever reason. They need to move on to their home, where we're all headed. More on that perhaps, but I'm out of time, so that's it. God bless you all. It's good to post something again for you. Good day. Birthday wish there, huh? I lost my remote.